And welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. It's time for Opinion Court. Please use the hashtag Opinion Court if you're online so that we can track your conversation. We're at Citizen TV Kenya, and I'm at Anne Kiguta, and with an E. I'll reintroduce my guests to you and our topic tonight. To my left is Industrialization Cabinet Secretary Aden Mohamed. To my immediate right, Kibra MP Ken Okoth, and next to him, Edward Kisiangani, our resident political analyst. So President Uhuru Kenyatta today addressed his final Madaraka Day celebration, some under 60 or so days to the general election. And so tonight we're asking, in what state has he left the country? What is the state of the nation? And I'll pose that question to each one of you. Yes, what's the state of the nation?
Well, I think we marked Madaraka Day today on a very high note. We started a journey 4.5 years ago where a significant amount of infrastructure program was started. Some of those have been realized, and the highlight of that was the Madaraka Express that the President launched yesterday from Mombasa to Nairobi. And we have significant amount of, good news for Kenyans on many fronts, especially on the big things that are required to transform this country for the long term. And I would say an environment that the economy has for the last 4.5 years been on a much stronger footing than we've seen, growing at a much faster rate than many of our other peers on the continent and globally. And the infrastructure programs that have been started is beginning to take shape. And so what we are experiencing or going to see shortly would be now how to build on that platform to realize the benefit of those significant amount of infrastructure programs that have taken so long to be done. And so I feel very optimistic and very confident looking forward on an economy that I believe has got much more to offer. And Kenya has been recognized on many fronts about, the progress that it has made in many fronts: business, environment improvement, infrastructure development, issues of governance. And I think we are now going at a time when Kenyans have to make a choice about the future. And I believe the journey of transformation has now begun to take shape, and feel very optimistic about the future of our country.
Right. Ken, even as I pose the same question to you, you sit here in an interesting position as the legislator representing perhaps one of the poorest segments of Kenyan society. So in your perspective, what is the state of the nation?
I think there's too many people being left behind. Jubilee has done a great job in investing in infrastructure, and I think probably the questions then to be asked is, where we support infrastructure investment, is at what cost and in what sequencing. So the overpricing and the corruption linked to the infrastructure projects, which are also debt funded. So we will pay for them, our grandchildren will pay for them. So it's not a favor. So I think in that sense we're going in the right and wrong direction. But when I talk about investment in people, I think investments in really not just saying free maternity as a slogan, but actually following through step by step to make sure free maternity means free maternity. Not that a mother in Kibera has to bring her own gloves, has to bring her own sutures and things like that. So it's not free maternity. When we talk about free secondary education, 2 years ago on this show, I said if Jubilee wanted to win this election, and to make it not even an election, just a coronation, what they had to do is show us free day secondary education and free boarding secondary education. In 2017, they had pledged it as something to happen in 2015, 2016. These are types of programs we're investing in people. Imagine right now we're going to a campaign, they're promising to do it in 2018. There's no reason why I sit on the Education Committee and the Budget Committee to stop Jubilee from having sacrificed other projects, even a little bit of the budget that goes into corruption in the Ministry of Security, in the Ministry of Health, and put that money into free day secondary education. If children today from Kibra were going to Alliance for free on merit, those parents would be voting for Jubilee. There would be no election. You remember free primary education, what it did and for our country, the psyche and the Kibaki. So I think Jubilee has not invested as much in people. It has invested in things, and in the process they've also done a lot of corruption that has been involved there. That's pulling us back. that we will gain from this infrastructure project, but the fact that the projects are overpriced and allegations of corruption have not been properly tackled takes away from them.
So for you, the state of the nation, too many people are being left behind.
Too many Kenyans are being left behind. Even the price of unga, you've just run a story here. You can't buy 90 kg unga in Kibra, 90 shilling unga for 2 kgs, unless you buy 180 shillings worth of sugar. So you have to have 270 bob to go buy sugar that maybe you don't need if you're diabetic to get the unga. So I think there has to be a real concern, whoever the next government will be, to make sure as we invest in our infrastructure, we also invest in our people, including the poorest.
Right. Prof, if this was the President's last Madaraka Day address, if the game was to change after August, in what state would he have left the nation?
I think we have to be fair. The President has been very passionate about infrastructure, and in that case he will have left behind a spirit which tells Kenyans that until we invest in infrastructure, we are not going to develop. So even if the game changes, that is a good legacy, because I think in terms of feeling he has done very well. He has expressed it. You can see the passion, and he speaks through the voice of the people when he says we want to develop this country. So, but even if you say that some infrastructural changes like the SGR, I think I'm extremely happy with that. It is the right thing to do. But as the MP for Kibra has said, the question of corruption in this country, you know, the President is leaving the country when it's bleeding of corruption, which he pledged to overcome in 2013. The country is bleeding of ethnic hatred, which he also said he will deal with. But you can see the ethnic hatred. You see it on social media, and you say, what did he not do right? Because he actually pledged he will deal with it, and it seems that he's leaving the country in a worse state with regards to this hatred. Some of it very unreasonable, completely unreasonable. Actually, not some of it, most of it unreasonable, because our people need to be together, but ethnic hatred continues. I think he's also leaving the country if the game changes, or even if it doesn't change. Unemployment, the poverty levels are very high, and some of the messages that are being sent out as long-term solutions to our problems by Jubilee, most of the voters don't get that, because most voters want certain things that are immediate. When they ask for unga, they can't wait for 30 years to get unga. They want to get it immediately. So I think in terms of implementing his projects, he needed to look at the short term and the long term. And the short term are the basic things: what can bring food to the table, pay school fees in the morning, and then in the evening you have bus fare for the children. These are the things that Jubilee forgot about, and so in terms of that, it's not okay. So I think in general I can wrap it up this way, that in terms of intention, he has done very well, but he overpromised things. He has not implemented most of them. And when you walk across the streets, you find there is a real sense of despair, and which needs to be dealt with. If he wins the elections, that is a big challenge. He must change the direction of this country.
Right. Let's try and break it down area by area, and if we can focus on the economy a little bit, CS, because you said, you know, our economy is growing faster than the rest in the region, but still below what the Jubilee administration had promised, which is double-digit growth. We've seen a slump in terms of even meeting your own target. And what has complicated this is the inflation rate, which has just been, you know, frankly shocking. Now 11.7%, unga up by 23%, milk and sugar up by 43%, at least from statistics yesterday. What is going wrong?
Well, I think it is fair to say that we separate the issues between the long term and the short term. As a country, one of the reasons why we have done very poorly in the last 50 years is because of significant amount of underinvestment in infrastructure that this country needed so much. And look at the railway, for example. You know, it's nearly 200 years ago when the first railway was put in place. And today, you know, you talk of cases where transporting cargo from China to Mombasa is much cheaper than it has been moving cargo from Mombasa to Nairobi. And this is just the nature of how logistics costs have been. And these infrastructure programs are so critical to actually change and transform the way this economy is going to develop in the future. So there has been a lot of focus on that, and I think there's been significant amount of good, positive news that would propel this economy for the future. Now, let's talk about the short term. The day-to-day living that many Kenyans have to deal with. You know, a lot of focus has been given to different segments of our community. Some of the people who have suffered a lot in the past has been the small and medium-sized businesses in this country. And this government has made very deliberate, focused efforts in supporting that segment of the business by committing over at least 30% of its procurement programs to the SME sector, people who are disadvantaged in this society. Look at the program for the elderly that this government has put in place. Look at the medical care, the health care, the maternity issues that Ken talked about. So this is all being done in an environment where I think the wage bill of the public service has also been extremely high. The number of strikes that have been coming up, people asking for more money to be paid, and yet people don't want to be taxed a lot to actually fund all these short-term as well as long-term infrastructure programs. I think the issue of inflation and short-term hitches are all things that can be attributed to specific circumstances. Inflation has been, for as long as I can remember in the last 10 years, been hovering between 5 to 7%. Not many countries on the continent of Africa actually have been able to hit that level. The specific case about the 11%,
now at 11.7.
well, I mean, this is specifically attributed to the challenges that we've had, largely due to the high cost of food that you mentioned, and we know what has caused this: the drought that has come, the shortage of food that has, you know, increased those prices extremely high. So we will never expect to see a situation where the economy would always be smooth. We have to deal with the bumps and, you know, the opportunities that we realize. What is important is how do we deal with it in actually getting ourselves out of this.
Right. Ken?
I think what the CS is saying, I must respond. First of all, you get a sense that the Jubilee government has been struggling to chew gum and to walk at the same time. He started talking about all this great infrastructure problem. That was already a national agreement. We had a consensus, Vision 2030, do this, do that, and do it properly. But nowhere was it say do it with corruption, do it with inflated costs, which will then take away from those men. So I think that's, on the short-term thing, I think the people in government and advising the Jubilee government live in a different Kenya from the real Kenya we live in. And they should take time and walk and hang out with the young people who sit day in, day out with no opportunities and listen to them. I've mentioned the young men. You don't know what's happening to the young women in places like Korogosho, Kangware, Kibera, Mathare. They don't sit day in, day out. They suffer to make sure they have something small even for their children. When you say cost of milk has gone 43%, and you're a young mother in Nairobi who's jobless, unmarried, and you're trying to raise a child who's even 1 year old, and you don't have money to buy the milk. So that I think there's a sensitivity. The government needs to be very aggressive to make sure that the daily needs of the people are met, even as you're doing the long-term project.
Yeah, let's talk about jobs, because that has been a critical issue. Aden, you know, how many jobs have been created by this administration, and in what sectors?
Well, we take stock of jobs that are created in this country every year. On average, if you look at the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics data, more than 800,000 jobs are created. Understandably, most of those would be in the small and medium-sized sector, where people that are, you know, starting small businesses, employing between 5 to 10 people, and that is a remarkable number compared to what actually is happening elsewhere. So the commitment that this government has made has been about 1 million jobs a year, but we have crossed. Last year alone was about 880,000 jobs that were created. This is something that, of course, falls short of the expectations of many Kenyans, given the number of youths that are unemployed. But that said, we cannot fix all those issues at one go. The opportunities and the roadmap that has been taken in dealing with these issues is to move people away from formal jobs to much more vocational and technical training. And that is why this government has made significant amount of commitment and investment in establishing technical and vocational training institutes in each constituency in this country. Not in a county, but each constituency. This is to get a lot of our young people from just finishing university without any skills and now being trained to deal with much more practical skills that are required by business, by industry, to actually help them go forward.
You see the CS, I think the question that Anne is asking hinges on the practical aspect. She asked, how many jobs have you created? We want, if you go to Mandera, we want to look at the town and say, these jobs have been created by government. We go to the villages and see the jobs have been created by government. Because these are statistics you are talking about, but in essence, there are probably no jobs. Even when you go in places like Nairobi here, you ask, people are losing jobs more than they are getting them. And that is the reality. And the problem with this is emanating from the fact that this economy has been shrinking in terms of production. Its productive sector has been shrinking because there is little investment in expanding production. But the consumption rate of this economy is huge. More you can see from the last budget, we have almost 1.2 trillion shillings going to recurrent expenditure. But there is almost 660 billion shillings only going towards infrastructure and other things. So our development budget in this country is quite low, and we do not even invest rightly in the productive sector. But even where efforts have been made by the government to make sure that the productive sector is working, that money has been lost in corruption. You have state corporations such as the Kenya Airways. Every time I hear that the government is pumping money in Kenya Airways to help them come to the surface or Mumias, my stomach develops cartwheel. The reason why it develops cartwheel until I feel like even vomiting is because how many times can we be pumping money in enterprises that are coming down, and even when there is information on how to make them better, the government would rather wait for them to go into our debt situation and then try to resurrect them. So these are some of the things we are talking about, and we're saying, Mheshimiwa, that the government, the biggest obstacle in this government is that it doesn't listen to the people. I think when you are in that office and you call your colleague a minister, and you get out and enter into a very expensive vehicle, you think that people are happy with it. But as you cross through the city, they look at you as living in another world. And I think that is what Kenya is. You are not the only one, but we are just talking about even other government officers, including managing directors of the different places, probably even including myself. When they look at us, they look at us as living in a different world. So if you got this message from the beginning, you can then say, where are these jobs? If they are government jobs, how have you distributed them to reflect what the Constitution says, regional and even ethnic? Have you done that?
I think you are mixing so many things here, and you know, we can try to unbundle most of those things. But let's just talk about issues of jobs. Governments actually creates an environment that enable private businesses to create jobs. We have civil servants. We have one of the biggest challenges. You mentioned it yourself. The spiraling wage bill that is becoming a burden to this economy, that is taking so much away from development expenditure that this country so much needs. What we need to do, and what this government has done, is to actually enable the private sector to grow, to create jobs, and to actually enable this economy to grow year in, year out. The productivity in this country, just for the record, manufacturing sector has been growing upwards of 3.5% year in, year out. The GDP has been growing each year in excess of 5%. These are facts that are actually in place. And just to demonstrate what this government has done to enable private businesses to grow, these 880,000 jobs have not been created by government directly. It's by government through the relevant investments in infrastructure. SGR itself has created more than 40,000 jobs during its construction phase. The small and medium-sized businesses that I talked about did that. Private sector businesses, multinationals, our local companies have expanded significantly. Of course, there will be others which would have shrunk. But we should be looking at the much more holistic number as opposed to just picking the pieces of those that have actually grown. So overall, I have said specifically more than 800,000 jobs on average has been created year in, year out. Most of those have been created by private sector. We would expect the private sector to continue to do that by government providing the enabling environment, both on infrastructure by reducing the overall cost of doing business in this country, but also by improving the softer side of the ease of doing business in this country. And I think on those scores, it's not the government that is talking about it.
All right, let's allow him to respond to that, and then we need to move on.
Yeah, so I'd say very quickly, first of all, when Donald Trump came into power in the U.S. and his inauguration address, he said, this is the day America begins to be America first. I wish here in Kenya, our leadership, including the government that is in place now for the next 67 days, would say not just Kenya first, but Kenyans first. He has said 40,000 jobs in SGR. The SGR was a huge project. The Chinese were allowed to come in with all the people they wanted to do those jobs. You cannot tell me that the issue of fabricating the railway beds, the concrete pieces, is not work that young Kenyans with basic technical training from those technical training institutes we've been budgeting for and building in the last 3 years together can't do that work.
Young Kenyans were doing that.
No.
Young Kenyans were doing that. I have been to the ground. Young Kenyans were doing that.
So why are Kenyans complaining if they have jobs?
I think it's been very defensive. Let me tell you, you live in a different Kenya from the one we live in. You've said something that is factual and correct. So the economic GDP has grown by this much, and something else you said what the thing is. But I'm telling you, the fact of the matter is that when you come to the productivity is what you was talking about, and that's a very key word. Productivity and efficiency is all very nice. That results in a situation where the numbers on paper look like Kenya is growing, yet nobody is getting jobs. And unless you address that, it's a ticking time bomb. I'll tell you how to address it. You're in charge of the sector on industrialization. Agribusiness, you have to link that with your work very strongly. How do we get, for instance, the leather sector? The young people who are raising cattle and camels and things like that. How do you do value addition for them to export? Camel cheese from here. Bananas, banana chips from here. Mangoes, we produce them in one season, the best mangoes in the world. They're done in that season, farmers make losses. How do we go into agribusiness and create
that's actually a very good point, Ken,
and I'll tell you, look at our shoes.
In the Ministry of Industrialization, part of what she was supposed to be really focusing on was agro-processing, and I think there's a big plant meant to come up in the coast around that. What is the progress?
Let me tell you some of the things. In the last 4.5 years, some of the things that, for example, my ministry has put a lot of emphasis on. We've looked at creating an environment where labor-intensive industries are supported by this government. Textile sector, for example, textile sector is one sector that has been one of the biggest employers in this country. We have, in the last 3.5 years, added more than 20,000 jobs in the textile sector, exporting to the U.S. market under the AGOA program. We are building a leather city, the first of its kind in Machakos County, in a place called Kenani, on a 500-acre piece of land, where we will be consolidating the entire leather industry that is today scattered across different areas in Nairobi, with significant amount of expenditure on effluent treatment plants that many people can actually cope with. That program has been kicked off, and when it's complete, it would bring the tanners together, the shoemakers together, the accessories that are required to do that. I'll need to take you there to actually come and see. So on the agro-processing, there is so much that is going. You go to Malindi. There is a company that is processing all the mangoes that have grown between Tana River and Kilifi and Malindi, that is exporting the tomato puree to markets like Netherlands. And of course, bananas, there are things that are happening in that particular area. There are issues that we need to fix, of course. Getting our agricultural produces to the markets before they start getting bad. And that is why infrastructure is so critical. And I can tell you, until you do the foundation, until you fix the foundation, you cannot build a house.
Let's talk about infrastructure, gentlemen, because we must move forward. And of course, you've touched on SGR, CS, and it's been one of the high points for the administration, at least in the last few days. But there is a prevailing school of thought that that railway line alone is not enough to spur the kind of economic growth that the government has been touting, that the required services, amenities that would bolster growth and make it possible for industries to crop up around the railway line are not there. Running water, electricity, sewerage, etc. What is your thoughts on that?
You see, it's really the cat and the horse kind of story, where which one do you do first? We believe that once this railway line becomes functional from Mombasa through the port of Kisumu into our neighboring countries, Mombasa port is going to be the place that would be serving the hinterland of East and Central Africa. And let me just give you an example. Industries today are struggling to come and invest in places like Nairobi, where the logistics hubs are developed because of the cost of land. People cannot afford to pay 300-400 million shillings for an acre of land to build a factory. But why do they want to do this today? It's because that's where there's logistics, that's where transport system is working. But today, you can build your factory in Mtito and Day. You have labor that is at half the cost of what you can get in Nairobi. People live in their houses, don't have to travel. And you have the means to put actually your heavy production onto cargo to export if you want to send it through the port of Mombasa, or if you want to sell it to Nairobi, you can send it. And look at what that has done to the cost of logistics just by what happened yesterday. The amount of money that would be spent on a cargo container has been about 100,000 shillings. The SGR is going to bring that down to about 50,000 shillings. And let's assume, I mean it's very unlikely, but let's assume the 1 million containers that come through the port of Mombasa today are all going to be put through the rail today. 50 billion shillings will be saved. That saving is going to be reinvested to create more jobs and to actually enable people to do much more within the economy.
You see, Mheshimiwa, I think I am with you on the question of infrastructure. In fact, I started off by saying that I'm very happy with what is happening in the infrastructural area, electricity, and of course the roads, and of course now the railway. That is a good thing. But the reason why we are going at a slow pace and people don't realize the intentions are good is because a lot of the money, even which is allocated to the infrastructure development, is lost through corruption. So the question that we are telling you is that you can own up. You have a host of people that you work with. How much of that money is put to good use? I think most of us in the public domain would be very happy to see that all the money that is allocated to infrastructure, all the money that is borrowed for infrastructure is used for the cause for which the money was procured. But it is not the case. So in terms of even achieving our objectives through the flagship projects we had for Vision 2030, we are likely not to achieve much. You are going at a snail's speed because a lot of money is lost through officials in your ministry and other ministries to government officials, thinking that when there's money borrowed from outside, this is a time to become rich, build hotels. And so we think that the government, if it hasn't been strong enough, the Jubilee administration has been rich on rhetoric over this issue of wastage in this economy, stealing of public funds. It has been really very, very strong on rhetoric, but very weak on taking action to make sure that public funds are prudently used.
What rhetoric are you talking about? We are talking a situation where the number of Kenyans connected to electricity today have moved from 2.3 million to 6 million households. You call that rhetoric? The amount of power supply in this country in the last 4.5 years has been about 1.7 gigawatts. Today, it's increased by 700.
I will give you an example. You remember the money?
These are things that happen.
I want to supply you with some information which can help you. There is some information which can help you, Mheshimiwa.
Okay.
You see, for example, the government procured some World Bank money or a World Bank loan to help in the electrification program so that people can get electricity. And it has had support from outside. But you know, you are a minister. Go and check and find out whether what people go through to get what you call this electricity.
You just go and check.
I know. I know how many days it takes people to get power connected in this country.
And the excuses that are given for not being supplied with electricity.
Let me tell you. Yes. There is something called ease of doing business that I have oversight across the whole government that is measured by the World Bank. And one of those key indicators is how long it takes Kenyans to get electricity connection by small businesses that don't know people, that don't have big lawyers.
Yes.
See what KPLC has done in the last few years. We have been ranked as Kenya, independently by the same World Bank you are talking about, as the third most improved economy in the world. And one of those improvements has been the amount of improvements and transformation in getting electricity connection. That is a fact that is being demonstrated, and not the matter of corruption or throwing stones, moving at slow pace. You know, see what has happened in the last 4 years. Don't be dismissive of that.
No. Today is Madaraka Day. It's a day for all Kenyans.
Yes.
Kenya today is a country of 45 billionaires and 45 million poor people. Even the people who think they're middle class in Kenya driving a second-hand Toyota imported from Japan are only one medical calamity away from poverty. You get cancer in Kenya today and your middle class status disappears if your mother gets sick and you have to pay their bills. So I'm telling you, we're living in a country of 45 billionaires and 45 million poor people. And the statistics you're quoting, ease of business, are very good from the World Bank. And if you're a billionaire in Kenya, the opportunities exist for you to take, you know, shares in the market and this. And if you're a poor person, and you've talked of ease of doing business, one of the ease of doing business is the ease of starting business. For young people in my generation, and younger than me, the people I represent in Kibra, to get access to the money, how much funding is there in Uwezo Fund? And this is a man of integrity. He came from Barclays Bank. Nowhere has he been mentioned poorly. So I know why it's very hard for you to defend the corruption in the government, because you're not involved in it and you have not been mentioned anywhere. Keep it that way. I pray for you. Keep clean. But the reality of the matter is that today, look at the youth fund. A young person from Kibra to get access for the youth fund for the last 3-4 years, it's very hard. Why? The money was stolen when Bruce Odhiambo was in charge. Bruce Odhiambo stole hundreds of millions of money there. He's not in jail, and the young people are broke, can't get access to those. So they can't even start the smallest business. The businesses you're talking about, ease of doing business, is access to credit. When the Kenyan government is borrowing in the market and told us we will get Eurobonds and the yields are good and this and that, all the politics aside, the fact of the matter is the government you're serving is still borrowing and competing with a regular Ken Okoth or Ann Kiguta when we want to start our next business or buy a small plot or build something. We have to compete with your government in getting money, and we can't keep up. So there is an ease of doing business, but access to credit for starting business for Kenyans. And this is the point I was telling you. Make sure no Kenyans are being left behind. Think of an environment where more Kenyans. Don't tell us grand projects where only the Chinese can conceive them, they can come finance them, they implement them and run them. I saw the advertisement that the China Railway Company did. There is no logo of Kenya Airways there. They're asking for people to come look for jobs. And one of the conditions is a willingness to learn Mandarin. And you're working in Kenya. You know, there's nothing bad with learning Mandarin and engaging with a new partner. But I'll go back to the issue that you are in charge of. You talked about jobs, 20,000 jobs through AGOA and fabric exports. You talked about the issue of shoe and leather tannery being done in Machakos. I hope that project gets done quickly. It will benefit Kenyans. But the fact of the matter is, you cannot tell us because the government was doing SGR, you haven't done that. That's a project you could have completed in 4 years. Why hasn't it been completed?
Was there competition for resources? Because we also saw SGR.
I'm in the budget committee. I'm in the budget committee. I'm in the budget committee. Let me tell you, I'm in the budget committee. We've been giving ministry money for 4 years. Why haven't you done it? You talked about fabrics to AGOA. 20,000 people earning minimum wage jobs in our export processing zones, while we could be doing 200,000 people producing Kenyan cotton. Right now we are producing fabrics. Nice jacket you've made can be made here in Nairobi, right, for export. But it's using cotton imported from India and other places. Why don't we go for the 200,000 jobs? We used to have Mount Kenya Textile. We had Rivertex. We had Kikomi. Those were the places where we were talking about 200,000 jobs. So I'm telling you, 20,000 jobs is good, but it's not good enough. And that's why we are in pain.
You've made so many critical points, and we don't want to lose them.
Well, look, first of all, let's not confuse one another. I mean, I'm glad that you appreciate the infrastructure, the importance of it, and what has been done so far. I
appreciate your integrity. And
I also, and you appreciate my integrity. I also want to acknowledge that we cannot take Kenyans out of poverty just in 3.5 years. I think what we are saying is, whilst recognizing the challenges that our people are in, the different conflicting demands that are all so much in need of resources, needs to be prioritized. And whether it's education, which is taking one of the biggest share of our budget, or security, which is another critical issue, or issues of healthcare, building infrastructure, continue to employ our civil service, these are very difficult acts to balance that is so easy to criticize from the outside. But what I can tell you is, we have not said as a government all issues and troubles that Kenyans have has been resolved or will be resolved in the short term. It is a journey. We've got to start it from the point where we believe this trajectory gives us the best chance to succeed and to give us the best hope and chance. One of the biggest things that we need to do in this country is to make sure that agriculture, which is our biggest employer of our people, today have ability for the 30-40% wastage that happens today because of underinvestment in infrastructure is reversed. It is the single biggest thing that we do. And that is why the small-scale farmers today that you see in Rift Valley continues to get support for fertilizer. We have to do and deal with those kind of issues. So I think this is a journey. It will always be a journey for everybody. But this trajectory, the journey that I've articulated, is one that I think we deal with the hard infrastructure and the softer ones as well. And by the way, the issues of the ease of doing business is not for the billionaires. It's actually for the small, medium-sized businesses. And we have not resolved that 100% either. But it is important to say that 4 years ago, we were ranked 137 position in the world out of 189 countries. Today we are position number 92. We want to get to be the 50th most competitive economy in the world. That requires a lot of things. We all need to pull together as a country and take the advantage that we want from this country.
All right, we have to wind up, and I want to give you the opportunity for a closing remark, but it must be just in 1 minute. And the question is this: in the 4.5 or so years that this administration has been in power, Prof, is Kenya better off now, having been under President Kenyatta, than if it had gone another way?
Well, if we go sectoral, then we can say in some respects it's better than it was. But if we go holistically, I think we are not doing very well. And I just want to say one thing that I just want to for thought. It's not even a discussion. The law of comparative advantage. If the sugar from Uganda is cheaper, you don't have to invest in sugar production. You cannot import raw materials to produce products which you can export. So you need to inject more expertise in the management of this economy. I don't think some people know what they want.
Is Kenya better off now than it was 4 years ago?
I think Kenya has mortgaged itself a lot to countries like China. I wish, as the industrialization minister, he will find a way to put Kenya and Kenyans first, as we're taking loans from China, allowing Chinese people to come build the railway, to run it for the next 30 years as they get back the investment. Let us open up the Chinese market so that our leather goods are going into China as much as they're bringing their people and their things here and dumping. Number two is let us invest in people. There's too many Kenyans being left behind. I'm speaking for the young people, boys, girls in Kibra, Korogosho, Kawangware, across this country who are hopeless. And that is also a security threat to this country. Those young people who feel they have nothing to lose are the kinds of people who can be used to destroy the system, whether through radical extremist groups like Al-Shabaab recruiting them, or just any other. So I think we're leaving too many people behind, a whole generation. Let us build the economy in a way that lifts up many people quicker and faster, and I hope he'll accept my idea that let us go not just to do fabrics, but let us make sure we're getting the cotton from here to do those fabrics, and that is where you will create the jobs, the 200,000 jobs, not just 20,000 jobs of stitching clothes together.
Fair point. And CS, I'm sure your perspective is that Kenya is better off now than it has been.
Well, I think we can only appreciate how well or bad we are if we see how other countries have done compared to us. Kenya's economy is probably one of the most diversified in the region. When everyone else has been coming down, we have been going on a steady growth. We were ranked twice in a row as the third most improved economy in the world. Today we are ranked as the second most attractive investment destination on the continent of Africa. I believe we have started a journey that has been noticed. We are getting many companies that are leaving their traditional home base of manufacturing, Volkswagen, Peugeot, many others. You know, we will be making an announcement significant enough to actually demonstrate what this country is going through in terms of investment from corporates in the next 4 weeks in Kisumu, actually, to see how diversified the investment in this country has been. And I definitely would say we're in a much stronger position, but I think the better piece is yet to come, and I would like to see how we can push this trajectory forward.
And I thank you all for your very reasoned views. We're taking a short break, and we're back with more after this.